3 months after we broke up, my ex-boyfriend suddenly called me. "Everyone in the bar has left, Madeline. Why don't you take me home?" My eyes instantly became wet, and I suppressed my sobs and asked him in a low voice where he was. A wild laugh suddenly burst out from the phone, and he was out of breath. "You are a fool. I am playing truth or dare." I choked up and said, "You can call me whatever you want, Jeremy, as long as you come home with me." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Damn, who is Jeremy? 1. 3 months after the breakup, my disease relapsed. The dream I hadn't had for a long time came to torment me again. In the dream, a gloomy and handsome man kissed me and did the most intimate thing, but he put a gun at my waist. He said, "Love me," painfully, then pulled the trigger with red eyes. A gunshot rang out, but there were no bullets in the gun. But my dagger cut open his neck without hesitation. In the dream, the man died with a successful smile on his face before he died, and asked me to take him home with a smile. My heart was filled with great sadness, and I woke up with a suffocating feeling. Ridiculous to say, this dream tortured me for 3 years. The heartbreaking pain in the dream still tortured me after I woke up, making me fall into the pain of losing my lover for a long time. I went to see a psychiatrist for this, and I said that I fell in love with the person in my dreams. That man's name is Jeremy. After hypnosis and sleeping pills failed to help, the doctor suggested that I fall in love and see if I could transfer to another love. If not, it would be a good idea to quit. That's when Luke showed up. He looks exactly like the person in my dream, too. I also thought he was Jeremy in the dream. The same eyebrows, the same voice, and even the curve of the corners of the mouth are equally careless. In the bar, he was leaning in the corner with his drunken eyes, grabbed the corner of my clothes and asked me if I could take him home. That look was like a lifetime ago. I thought my Jeremy finally came out of his dream. I took him home and stayed with him on the sofa all night. But when he opened his eyes and met my sad gaze, he was overjoyed. He smiled so much that his shoulders shrugged. "Nothing happened. Are you a little disappointed?" As he said this, he glanced at my collar. "Next time the collar is lowered, I might not fall asleep so quickly." Even though he was unreasonable, my sense of fate still made me put aside my dignity and come together with him. At first I loved him so much that I couldn't help myself. I would ask him if he would never leave me in the evening when the sunset was red. At midnight, when he woke up with a start, he would raise his hand and touch his neck to make sure there were no wounds before he could sleep peacefully. I repay all the debts I owed to Jeremy in the dream to him, and indulged him infinitely, cleaning up the mess he caused without complaint. When he was hospitalized, he took care of him with all his clothes on, fearing that he would disappear in the blink of an eye like in a dream. He would often look at me in trance and murmur why he didn't meet me earlier. At that time, I didn't know the depth of his words until that Valentine's Day date. 3. Luke, who has always been low-key, suddenly went out on a high-profile date with me. He came to a high-end restaurant with a bouquet in hand. The lazy pace and burning eyes attracted many girls to look at him, and some even took out their mobile phones to secretly take pictures. He glanced at the person taking the secret photo and smiled. "The photo will look better." As he spoke, he leaned over and pressed a lingering kiss on my lips. I heard something in my chest, thumping, pounding, about to spill out. Amid the booing, he asked the person for a photo and sent it to his WeChat moments in a high-profile manner. I wonder, is he finally going to take this relationship seriously that started off so ridiculously? However, after doing all this, he was a little absent-minded. Faced with my joy and anxiety, he dealt with me one after another, turning on his phone to take a look from time to time. It wasn't until he received the call with the note that he suddenly straightened his back and glanced out the window vaguely. I asked him to go do his business first, but he hung up the phone and smiled lovingly at me. "Being with you today is the most important thing," he said, took a mouthful of vegetables and fed me affectionately. He may not have realized it himself, but what he gave me was for plating that lettuce. After feeding, he picked up the napkin and wiped my mouth, but the corners of my mouth were not dirty. A bad premonition arises spontaneously. Sure enough, after a series of intimate gestures, the phone calls started to bombard like crazy, again and again. Luke smiled awkwardly, then pretended to be reluctant and said that the company had something to do and he had to leave first. I smiled and asked him to go and come back quickly. He looked at me with a complicated expression, hesitated for a few seconds, and then turned around and left impatiently. I followed him by surprise and saw a beautiful girl standing downstairs not far away. From that angle, I had a clear view of what Luke and I were doing in the restaurant. A thought made me shiver. Luke's high-profile date was probably not just for this girl. Luke ran away, but when he approached the girl named Bianca, he slowed down and looked impatient. He said he was dating and asked Bianca to tell her if she had anything to say. Bianca looked distressed and asked him why he ruined her. She said, "Even if I don't agree to be your girlfriend, you can't just find someone to ruin yourself. Are you worthy of the people who care about you?" Luke was silent for 2 seconds. His silence was like a sentence to me, a sentence that I was indeed the random person. After a long while, I heard him say angrily, "How do you know I can't really fall in love with her?" Bianca smiled bitterly. "Don't you know what love feels like?" As he said that, he grabbed Luke's collar, stood up on tiptoes and kissed him. A passionate and domineering kiss. Luke was stunned on the spot. In just a moment, Bianca pulled away. "The war is in chaos. This is what makes my heart beat. So Luke, even if I don't agree to be with you, you can't just find someone to mess with you." At that moment, I hid behind the pillar and cried silently. Only then did I realize that I was not destined. I was just someone he randomly found to stimulate Bianca. He hated Bianca for swinging around, so he randomly approached me. He picked me in the bar and said that the colder I looked, the more fun I would have in private. He bet that I would pick up corpses in the bar, and I actually picked him up. I was behind the pillar like a voyeur, watching them quarrel fiercely, then hug each other and kiss passionately. They looked very much like the male and female protagonists of sadistic novels, and I was just cannon fodder. There was a heartbreaking pain in my heart, and I decided to break up. But whether it was an illusion or not, the suffocating feeling that had been weighing on my chest because of Jeremy for the past 3 years was actually much lessened. That might be what the doctor calls withdrawal. Luke didn't come back very late that day. I looked through his friend's circle and found that the photo showing affection was gone. We met again a few days later. Luke came over in a hurry, hugged me like we were reunited after a long separation, then lowered his head and kissed me. He closed his eyes and savored it. I think he was trying to appreciate whether there was anything like chaos in this kiss that Bianca said. I pushed him away, and he looked away in panic, with a guilty look and confusion in his eyes. There was a dense pain in my heart again. This time I was sure that the suffocating feeling in my heart was indeed disappearing. Since he took advantage of me first, it doesn't seem like an exaggeration for me to treat him as a withdrawal drug. 5. In the following period, Luke became more and more confident with my indulgence. He was hot and cold towards me, and would show off his affection to me like crazy when he needed me. Once he achieved his goal of stimulating Bianca, he would become indifferent to me again. It wasn't until Bianca alienated him again that he would think of me as a tool again. And all this, I just pretended not to know, humble and careful to be his loyal follower. And his friends all knew that I was a stand-in who came to his door. They said that I was a licker, and sometimes they even forgot to avoid me. At that time, Luke only asked them to say less in a symbolic way. He was constantly testing my bottom line, and when he discovered that my indulgence had no bottom line, he lost a lot of respect for me. And I endured the heartache of being betrayed and teased all my life, and in the process, I completed the withdrawal bit by bit. I clearly felt that every time Luke pointed at me in front of Jeremy's face, when I am angry, my attachment to Jeremy becomes even less. I rarely have that dream. There is not much left of the suffocating feeling in my chest. I am using this stupid way to say goodbye to Luke and Jeremy. 6. I thought I'm about to succeed. That night I dreamed of Jeremy again, and Jeremy said goodbye to me as if he had realized something. He said, "Long time no see, Madeline, have you almost forgotten me? If forgetting makes you happier, that's fine with me." In the dream, his shadow gradually faded away, and his neck still bore the blood marks I scratched with my dagger. I woke up with tears streaming down my face. My heart hurt so much that I couldn't breathe. So I dialed Luke's phone as a self-help. He said what a coincidence, he happened to be looking for me. He said his car broke down on a country road and asked me to pick him up. I went out without hesitation. Only when he got there did he find out that he was going to his hometown to pick up the sick Bianca. Before I could say anything, He preemptively asked me not to misinterpret the mutual concern between them since childhood. Whether it was to avoid suspicion in front of me or to continue irritating Bianca, he chose to sit in my passenger seat and left Bianca alone in the back seat. Unfortunately, as soon as the car drove onto the country road, it collided with an out-of-control tractor coming from the opposite direction. I thought of Jeremy's leaving figure in the dream, and I became so flustered that I turned the steering wheel desperately without control. Luke is safe and sound. My eyes were bloodshot from the airbag, and I was trapped in the cab unable to move. In a daze, I heard Luke's heartrending shouts. He called Bianca. At that moment, I clearly felt that the suffocating feeling in my chest was about to disappear completely, and the withdrawal was immediately successful. But when I woke up in the hospital, Luke broke up with me with red eyes. He looked at the bleeding bandage on my forehead, shook his hands and said, "I was just joking, how could you take it seriously?" I was so scared that I cried and begged him, "It's okay to break up, but can we wait? Just wait until I successfully quit." I was embarrassed and humble, causing people around me to whisper. Luke couldn't bear it in his eyes, but he finally clenched his fists and ran away. 7. I knew he was scared, so I risked my life to save him, but he couldn't bear it. But is a playboy like him afraid of trampling on other people's sincerity? Or maybe it wasn't fear, but Bianca was injured, and he wanted to fight for himself wholeheartedly. Anyway, for whatever reason, my withdrawal was interrupted just when I was about to succeed. I lived in fear for 3 months, always worried that the big rock would fall again. Yet it came. After having that dream again, I suddenly woke up. I curled up on the bed, shook my hands and lit a cigarette. The smoke spread, and it was the familiar smell from the dream, but the pain in my heart became more and more uncontrollable. Luke's call came in at this moment like a life-saving straw. A low and slightly aggrieved voice came unexpectedly. "Everyone in the bar has dispersed. Madeline, why don't you take me home?" The voice was exactly the same as in the dream. My eyes instantly became wet, and I choked back my sobs and asked him in a low voice where he was. But I heard wild laughter bursting from the microphone, and many people were laughing. The depression and grievance just now disappeared without a trace, and Luke laughed so hard that he was out of breath. "You fucking tiger, I'm playing truth or dare." I felt like someone had poured cold water on me. The sad emotions were poured out of the gap, and the suffocating feeling on his chest suddenly eased. The withdrawal medicine started to take effect again after 3 months. So he choked out tentatively, "You can scold me for whatever you want, as long as you come home with me." The laughter grew even louder, and Luke couldn't hide his pride in his voice. "Can't you understand? I'm playing a fucking game. Don't let it go on forever." Sure enough, the feeling of suffocation became weaker and weaker. I stood up and put out the cigarette. "Tell me where you are, Jeremy, and let me see you again." There was silence on the other end of the phone. After a while, "Damn, who is Jeremy?" Following Luke's roar, whispers came from the other side of the phone. "Damn, isn't she Luke's dog licker? How come she calls another man's name? Luke, can you do it? I just didn't know how to do it. You are the one that Jeremy agreed to pick you up. You should lose this game." Luke lost face, gritted his teeth and scolded me. "Don't think you can fool me by just making up someone. I've put this on the steps for you and sent you the address. It won't be half an hour, so don't even think about getting back together again." I quickly drove out according to the address Luke sent me. Although the suffocation feeling is not as strong as it was at the beginning, it still makes me feel very uncomfortable, like a stone pressing on my chest. I know that the face Luke lost will be recouped from me later. The more he goes too far, the better it will be for my withdrawal. Perhaps this insult will be the last strong medicine for my withdrawal. If it fails, it means that Luke, as a withdrawal drug, has developed resistance. It's time for me to change my dressing. 5. The bar was very lively. Most people stayed up because they wanted to watch the show. Let's see how Luke humiliates a licking dog who calls the wrong name. When I entered, they were looking at their watches to check the time. Damn, it really didn't take more than half an hour. You had to break through the lights all the way here. Luke is so awesome. Are all women so superficial these days? Do they really only care about their looks? She's still licking her after teasing her like this. Luke still leaned in the dark corner and said nothing. The light and shadow covered half of his face, making him look more like Jeremy. The moment they looked at each other, The sadness like drowning slowly came over them again. Perhaps the unconsciously red eyes pleased Luke, and he raised the corners of his lips and smiled at me. Then he picked up the wine and poured 3 large glasses full, and said like a charity, "Drink them all and I will forgive you." As he spoke, his face was reflected in the light. Looking at it this way, it's like Jeremy walked out of a dream. I don't know why he came back to me again, whether he had a falling out with Bianca again or if he really found out about me. But that's not important. What's important is that this time, the feeling of suffocation is almost gone. The smile on my lips instantly attracted ridicule. "Oh my God, are you so happy that you are covering your chest? Does Luke want to teach you some training skills some other time? You are too obedient in your training." The harsh words did not affect my excitement at all. I picked up the glass and drank it all in one gulp. The first cup is a tribute to myself and to me for persisting and not giving up easily. There were boos mixed with murmurs of taunts. "Damn it, are you cheap? You can come and go when you call me." Luke allowed his friends to sneer at me. Not only did he not speak, but he also showed a bit of pride on his lips. I took a deep breath and felt the big stone in my chest finally move away. So he picked up the second cup and looked straight at Luke. "Second cup, here's to Luke. Here's to Luke, who treats me without any pretense and doesn't behave like a human being." This time, the whispers turned into loud laughter and curses. "Damn, it's so cheap, ha ha ha. It's really good. Luke, let me take a number first. Don't throw this away when you get tired of it. Brother, I want to feel it too." Luke frowned slightly and glanced at the speaker displeased. But he still allowed me to finish the second glass of wine. My chest felt lighter than ever before, completely relaxed as I had never dreamed of Jeremy. Somewhat superior. I grinned and my steps became frivolous. I grabbed Luke's hand and put it in front of me and looked at it carefully. His tiger's mouth is delicate and smooth, and he must have never held a gun before. Turned over, there was a shallow scar on the forearm. Too shallow. Doesn't feel right to the touch. Jeremy's one is deeper. The surroundings were too noisy, as if they were saying that I was too casual, and Luke was going crazy with greed. Luke also rarely had a joking look on his face, and he comforted me softly. He said, "You are drunk, Madeline, don't worry, we are going home now." As he spoke, he stood up and helped me, but I held him down and stared at his open collar. After one final confirmation, I was reborn from the ashes. Amid everyone's disgusted, curious, and ambiguous looks, I slowly opened Luke's collar. Yes, there is no mole on the collarbone. There are no traces of laser ablation. Luke took a breath of air and his voice became hoarse. "Madeline, you can't be here." Amid the whistle, I suddenly became enlightened. Luke is definitely not Jeremy. As a withdrawal drug, it has already exerted its maximum effect, and after that, it will no longer benefit me. I suddenly pulled away and picked up the third glass of wine. Luke finally showed his unbearable expression and raised his hand to stop me. "You can't drink anymore, you're drunk." Before he could finish the words away, he looked at me with an extremely clear gaze in surprise. I looked at him with a smile. "This third cup should be used to commemorate the short-term fate between you and me." The wine glass tilted, and the wine slowly spilled at Luke's feet. "Luke, you act very much, but after all, you are not my Jeremy." In his shocked and angry eyes, I let go of my hand. Glass shards flew up, like a colorful dream shattered. 6. When Luke realized that Jeremy might be real, his face turned frighteningly gloomy. He threw the wine glass and kicked the person who was booing. He said, "Madeline, now change your mind and submit to me. I won't fucking care about you." I glanced at the mess on the ground and smiled at him. "No, Luke, you don't look like my Jeremy if you don't care. However, my Jeremy's calculations are not as low level as throwing a wine glass or kicking a younger brother. He will not say a word when he is provoked. He will load the gun, and he will not forget to add a silencer at the end." As I said that, I pointed my gun at his head. Boom! A vein popped up on Luke's forehead. I took one last look at him, turned around and left with a smile. The noise and chaos behind me no longer had anything to do with me, so I wiped away the tears on my face. Goodbye, Jeremy. Since I had decided to leave, I shouldn't bother him again under any circumstances. 7. After that night, my life returned to peace. Jeremy no longer comes to my dreams, and I inevitably feel lost when I have nothing to do. Luke actually sent me a message through someone else. The person said. I have never seen Luke so angry. He hung up the phone with Bianca and decided to go home with you. As long as you take the initiative to talk softly to him like before, then you'll be able to survive. I immediately deleted and blocked that person. I did get through it. I didn't feel like having angina pectoris every day, and it was much easier to work. It happened that the troupe started rehearsing a new play, and my co-star was the popular actor Jay. He came to the troupe to hone his acting skills, and the troupe attached great importance to it and did not hesitate to tailor a new script for him. But the moment I got the script, I felt chills all over my body. It was a life-and-death sadomasochism. The male and female protagonists were in different camps. After experiencing testing and teasing, the psychological defenses of the two gradually fell. Their sincerity is covered up by lies, and they fall between love and desire, seemingly true and false. When the final decision was made, the male protagonist took the lead and shot the woman. That's right. There are no bullets in the gun. The woman's dagger cut through the man's neck, and the man smiled and admitted defeat. In the next life, he said, "You will take me home in the next life." An invisible big hand instantly grabbed my throat, and sadness drowned me in it like a rising tide. Is this male protagonist named Jeremy? I murmured. That's when Jay came in. He strode in from the door, with the light behind him, and his outline seemed to be rimmed with gold. A group of people were walking around holding scripts and discussing something. He nodded to me politely and distantly, and then naturally sat on the sofa next to me. Jeremy is a good name, let's use this one, he said. Those peach blossom eyes, just a brief gaze, gave me some illusions. The illusion that he came for me. After saying that, he chatted intently with the director on the other side until his assistant brought fruit tea. While discussing the details, he casually took a cup and put it in front of me, as if there was still a tacit understanding. I was gradually dazzled by the completely different profile of his face from Jeremy's, until Jay's slightly deeper voice came. He said to the director, "Then let's try it out first, if Miss Madeline has no objection." As he spoke, he turned his head and looked at me questioningly. I came to my senses. What we wanted to try was the intimate scene during the farewell. The director wanted to see how tense our scenes would be. No matter how good the play is, if it doesn't have a CP feel, it won't be a hit, so I naturally have no reason to refuse. However, trying out an intimate scene for the first time would be awkward. The director thoughtfully cleared the scene, and during this interval, Jay asked me formally if there is any problem with the scale. I said I had read the script and accepted it. Jay nodded, then started to take off his suit jacket. Underneath is a black slim-fitting shirt, which outlines a slim waist. 2 buttons were undone, and the cold white collarbone and dark black fabric collided to create a charming scene. Jay raised his head as he unbuttoned his shirt. Caught off guard, I was frightened by the intensity and determination in his eyes. The legendary theater lunatic jumped into the show just by raising his eyes. The gentle, thoughtful, and distant handsome young man just now has long disappeared, replaced by the wild and unruly desperado in the play. He stared at me, approaching step by step, cruelty and despair flashing alternately in his eyes, and finally turned into unwillingness, hugging me dejectedly like a compromise. He turned me around, pressed me against the wall, and searched me from behind in a hugging position. No murder weapon was found, so he bit me on the back of my neck regretfully. I turned around in pain and bumped my cheek against his lips. He closed his eyes and kissed her painfully and haphazardly. Hair, brow bones, nose, and finally the corners of the lips. I made a sound as if in pain, but my words were choked with sobs. "Jeremy, are you going to do something?" I knew that if I followed the scene in the dream, his gun would be at my waist. Tears fell uncontrollably. Jay raised his head. He looked at me intently and affectionately, and gently wiped away my tears with his thumb. "Fuck fate," he said. As he spoke, he disarmed himself and threw his gun into the bathtub. The gun sank into the water, and Jay raised the corners of his lips and smiled, a smile of relief and beauty. Then he lowered his head and kissed her passionately and passionately. Kiss like there's no tomorrow. The director forgot to stop the audition, until Jay suddenly pulled away and cursed him. He cheered as if he had just woken up from a dream. "Okay, Okay, very good. This feeling is so good. It's just Teacher Jay, why did you change the script temporarily? Shouldn't you shoot, and then Madeline kills you? Jay regained his gentle manner, handed me a tissue and started to straighten his shirt. After a long while, he said in a hoarse voice, "The way the male protagonist dies is causing trouble for others." I stopped wiping my face with my hand and looked at him in disbelief. I had felt so resentful on countless nights when I woke up. Why did I resent Jeremy for forcing me to kill him, forcing me to bear the guilt? But such resentment was buried in deep grief and seemed insignificant. Sensing my gaze, Jay turned around. "Am I right, Miss Madeline?" he asked quietly. "8." Before I had time to answer his question, there was a loud noise at the door, and Luke rushed in angrily. As my ex-boyfriend, the staff did not try their best to stop him. He looked scary and grabbed my wrist. "Did you just call him Jeremy?" Jay happened to button it up. "Jeremy is just a guy I play in a lot of roles," he said, extending his hand to Luke in a gentlemanly manner. "Nice to meet you, my name is Jay." Luke grabbed me and didn't let go, arrogantly ignoring Jay's outstretched hand. Jay frowned slightly and tapped Luke's elbow with his hand like a fist. Luke felt pain instantly, curled up his arms and let me go. "Please respect me, my mistress." After Jay said this, he put his thumb across the corner of his mouth and wiped away the lipstick mark I had left there. 9. Luke's eyes were splitting, but he insisted on having a talk with me. He said he consulted my psychiatrist and knew I was sick. I don't know how the doctor talked to him, but he understood the situation a little differently. He thought that I couldn't help but love him, so he made up a person in his dream who was exactly like him, and named that person Jeremy. In his dream, he imagined that Jeremy was devoted to me and loved me to death. He thought I was sick because of him, so there was guilt in his eyes, but more of it seemed like he was proud. He said, "Madeline, it's my fault. I didn't know it would hurt you so deeply." I looked at him inquiringly, wondering what was wrong with his brain circuitry. He pulled me in as if he was distressed. "Before, you always touched me at night. Neck. It turned out to be because you dreamed that you hurt me, Madeline, and you suffered so much pain without me knowing it." I avoided his hand and he said, "You blame me, I know, but when you picked me up, I thought we had a tacit understanding and it was just for fun. I didn't expect you to be so affectionate. As long as you show a little more vulnerability, I will never hurt you like that." I stared at his face, dazed for a moment. I wonder if the Jeremy in my dream would have the same face when I didn't dream about it. This fantastic sadomasochism finally revealed his bug after I took a breather. Luke continued to guide himself. "Madeline, it's my fault. You used a supporting actor to heal your wounds for me. Call him Jeremy. I shouldn't let you down again. How about you stop being angry and I won't blame you anymore?" This was the first time that Luke lowered his attitude towards me. After saying this, he looked at me expectantly. After a moment of silence, I suddenly laughed out loud. The corners of Luke's mouth curled up unconsciously, but I said calmly, "Did the doctor tell you when I started dreaming about Jeremy?" He was a little confused. "That's not to say," he said with a distressed expression, "but we have known each other for more than half a year. Are you in this pain most of the time?" He was still immersed in a good feeling about himself, so I slowly pulled up the medical records on my mobile phone and held them up in front of him. 3.5 years, Luke. I've been dreaming about Jeremy for 3.5 years. Jeremy, that bastard has tortured me for 3.5 years. Fortunately, I met you. A scumbag who looks exactly like him. I stared into his eyes and said word by word, "I used you to quit him." Luke stood there dumbfounded, his cheeks visibly reddening. "Don't be angry yet," I said calmly. "You know you didn't suffer anything. For more than half a year, I came and went as soon as I was called. I was always generous with clothes, money, and I also served as the catalyst for the relationship between him and his little childhood sweetheart. No matter what, he did not lose. I helped him remember clearly that I owed him nothing, and then told him that he should not come to me again for reasons. This mutual use can be regarded as a good get-together." Luke stood there stupidly. I walked far away and suddenly heard him laughing. From a soft scoff to a loud, wild laugh. Just like what he said on the phone that day, damn arrogant and pitiful. 10. The days that followed were much purer, and the feeling of suffocation was replaced by an empty feeling in my chest. Fortunately, the stage play has officially started filming. and the feeling of emptiness was completely ruined by Jay's acting lunatic. He often changed the script unexpectedly. A deep sadomasochistic love affair for the sake of torture was completely changed by him into a story about a man who bravely pursues love and finds it difficult to reconcile. He did not follow the script when teasing her in the early stages of the script. He said that only unexpected collisions can make Miss Madeline feel a sudden heartbeat. He did indeed do it. Every line he said unexpectedly made me dizzy. The director said it was very touching. I was finally slowly touched by someone other than Jeremy. With my reddish cheeks and the trembling that spread from my chest to my eardrums, I felt like a secret admirer captured by Jay, being controlled and manipulated by him at will. At first I passively accepted those touches, but then Jay started asking for more. He said that he also needed me to give him that kind of unexpected teasing, so that it would be evenly matched to move people's hearts. So I looked up at him doubtfully and seriously. "Do you like me like this?" He was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "You learn very quickly." So we laughed. The director hissed in confusion. "Are you acting or are you serious?" Actually, I don't know if it was staged or real, but I saw Jay's ear turn red just for a moment. This state gave rise to something called hormones, which spread throughout the theater all day long. When we gradually brought this state to after work, news from Luke came again. 11. Luke was in a car accident, and he had already taken off his bandages when I got the news. Many injuries on the body are not serious, but it is said that the brain was injured. Looking for me like crazy in the hospital. I had no choice but to agree to answer his call. He was silent for a long time on the phone, and finally his low voice was choked with sobs. "Long time no see, Madeline. Have you almost forgotten me? If forgetting makes you happier, that's fine with me." After months of abstinence, the high defenses I built up suddenly collapsed at that moment. The bag fell to the ground. I didn't care to pick it up and ran out like crazy. Jay grabbed my wrist and frowned. "This scene isn't over yet. It's your turn to break the rules." I was stunned for a moment, but I couldn't think of anything. All I could think about was, Luke is Jeremy. Luke is Jeremy. Jay finally couldn't keep me, so I ran to the hospital and ran straight to Luke's bed. The bandage had been removed from his injured wrist. There was a deep wound snaking there, and this time it was exactly the same as Jeremy's. I opened his collar, and a small mole just appeared on his collarbone. I slumped into the chair behind me. He happened to meet Luke's red eyes. He said, "Long time no see, Madeline." With this sentence alone, I was sure that the person inside the skin was Jeremy. He looked at me for a long time, and his eyes became wet. This was his reunion after a long separation, after experiencing life and death. In his eyes, there was happiness at having recovered something, but more importantly, there was infinite regret for the harm he had done. He said, "Madeline, I had a long dream, and in the dream my name was Jeremy." He looked at me sadly. "That wasn't actually a dream, was it?" Of course it's not a dream. The feeling of heartache is so clear, and the deep love is unforgettable even if it is hidden in a dream. There was a dense pain in my heart again, and the infinite love I felt for Jeremy when I woke up in the middle of the night came back with a vengeance. It makes no sense but is irresistible. I thought of the dagger I had wielded, and of Jeremy's triumphant smile. "Don't forget me, Madeline. Take me home, Madeline." For 3 whole years I have not been thinking about my decline, but now I have found a place to stay. I thought I was going to rush over and hug my Jeremy, the destined person. Although I always feel that I shouldn't, I can't control myself. Just then Jay's call came in. "Miss Madeline, would you like to have a private date with your Mr. Jeremy tonight?" My Mr. Jeremy. When the word appeared, something in my mind was disturbed. After a month of rehearsals, when I heard the word Mr. Jeremy, the first thing that came to my mind was Jay's complaint. He often said, "The person who loves you will never let you kill him with your own hands." The voice on the microphone continued, "Miss Madeline, tonight I want to discuss the final plot with you, and how to change it to sublimate the theme of breaking through the sense of fate." My mind gradually cleared, and I resisted the urge to hug Jeremy. Directly opposite, Luke was still murmuring, "Madeline, that was not a dream, that was real." The dagger scratched on the neck hurts, but no matter how painful it is, it hurts more than goodbye. "Madeline," I thought, "I would never see you again." The trace of clarity in my mind was annihilated by the overwhelming feeling of suffocation. The two forces kept pulling me, and I tried my best not to open my arms to Luke. I think I did the right thing, because the next moment the girl named Bianca rushed in. She hugged Luke with a cry and buried her face in Luke's arms. Visibly frightened, she said she almost thought she had lost him. She was so upset that she finally seemed to see her sincerity clearly in the face of life and death. She wanted to take Luke to get a marriage certificate. Like a basin of cold water pouring down my head, I woke up instantly. Jay's complaint came from the microphone at the right time. How can Miss Madeline tolerate such a bloody plot? I sorted out my emotions, smiled, and some truth was ready to come out. I agreed to a date with Jay. 12. When I escaped from Luke's hospital room, Luke was coldly confronting Bianca. The sinister eyes and cruel words are completely different from the previous Luke, and the change is very sudden. I took the opportunity to run away, but I still couldn't escape the waves of gratuitous emotions. She tried her best to dial Jay's phone number and couldn't wait to hook her arms around his neck the moment he appeared. You said you want to discuss the plot. Is it okay to discuss it in any way? There was a faint light in his eyes and he smiled and said, as long as you are willing, I will stay with you until the end. So for the first time, I took the initiative to kiss him. I savored the feeling of that kiss. The heartbeat is real. Love is soft. It's not the so-called suffocation feeling. My fate seems to have been decided a long time ago. After the kiss, I looked up at Jay. You know that, right? He smiled and said nothing, and for a long time he gently tucked my hair behind my ears. No one else can decide your fate. What if I am the author? I asked calmly. If I said that this world is a novel, would you believe it? Jay looked at me carefully for a while. What's going on in your head? Are you going to abandon me with fatalism after provoking me? I didn't see any clues in his eyes, so I resumed my sly smile. I'm not provoking you, we are just discussing the plot. Teen. I took the initiative to end the topic, but the doubts in my heart were answered. I was sure that I was attracted to Jay, but I still couldn't help myself and had no hesitation when I saw Jeremy. This is unreasonable. I guess, as I thought, my destiny was indeed written by others. He said that Jeremy was the destined person. This conclusion was not a sudden one. I started looking for the reason from the moment I saw a psychiatrist. People suddenly appearing in dreams, thoughts extending from dreams to reality. All of this is abnormal. Until the withdrawal was successful, I thought I had escaped the invisible control. However, there was that script again. It reappeared the scene, forcing me to relive the sadomasochistic love affair with Jeremy, and it wanted to take control of me again. In order to finally verify this guess, I said goodbye to Jay and went to the temple that has frequently appeared in my ears recently. The enlightened monk took the initiative to ask me if I was trapped in love, as if he was waiting there on purpose. I just let him hypnotize me. The dream extended, and sure enough, there was Jeremy in my previous life. All the scenes in the dream actually happened in the previous life. We were in love but against each other. Jeremy made a painful decision and decided to leave his chance of life to me, and I died in depression shortly after his death. During this hypnosis, all the information told me that Luke now is Jeremy in his previous life. All the signs are clamoring. Now that Jeremy has awakened, it's time for us to renew our relationship. In addition to these, I also saw other things. Those were some scenes that had never appeared before. They were displayed there very vaguely, as if they had been erased for some reason. I asked the eminent monk tentatively, are those gradually disappearing scenes the trajectory that Luke and I should have had? Those original settings were being erased because my withdrawal behavior did not occur. The eminent monk's eyes averted, and he pretended to be profound and chanted, don't say it, don't say it. Is there anything unclear at this point? Even if he didn't say it, I would have already guessed it. My life is a novel, or a play. My joy, anger, sorrow, and joy all depend on the author's pen. I am grateful for Jay's appearance. He led me to question the script and Jeremy's suicidal behavior that caused trouble for others. He led me to use practical actions to ridicule this bullshit sense of fate. Now that everything is clear, I think I know what to do next. 14. That night, Luke didn't know what happened and didn't come to me again. I was finally inspired to work with the director overnight to finalize the final version of the show. Early the next morning, Luke showed up at the theater door injured. With a distant look, tears crawled down his face. He looked at me haggardly and intently, as if all the words he could say were in vain, so he said nothing. I asked my colleague to give him a front row ticket. Today's first audition, as if it was specially arranged, allows us to relive the hardships of our journey together at the moment of reunion, trying to offset the harm Luke did to me before. When the show starts, Luke sat in the audience without saying a word, looking like his temperament had completely transformed into that of Jeremy. So the whole scene, the sadness and despair, I wasn't acting. When Jay kissed me, I cried uncontrollably. When Jay and I described the future, there was no hope in my eyes, only despair. Jay frowned deeply. He tried to give me a sense of security and help me break through my fate, just like he did during rehearsals. However, I stopped talking again and again, and he finally became worried. Colleagues around us were shocked to find that the development in our play was exactly the same as the original script. The changes that were made after a lot of effort and sparks collided were not shown at all. The whole performance was incredibly depressing. At the last moment, the despair in my eyes finally spread to Jay. He hugged me from behind and searched me intimately. He deliberately ignored the dagger hidden in my waist. He bit me, then kissed me messily with his eyes closed, as if to imprint the feeling firmly in his bones. At the most passionate moment, a pistol was placed on the waist. "Jeremy, are you finally going to take action?" Boom! The gunshot rang out, and I turned around and slit Jay's neck. Blood gushes out and Jay smiles triumphantly. "Madeline, don't forget me." At that moment, I couldn't tell the difference between the dream and the play. I burst into tears, and Luke in the audience also had tears streaming down his face. I read determination in his eyes. Although he was sad, he was determined. When he saw me crying, he firmly believed that I still loved him deeply, and that we would eventually renew our relationship in the previous life. Those dreams that belong to us make us look at each other, as if we understand each other tacitly every second. The pinching pain in my heart almost made me believe it myself. If Jay hadn't suddenly sat up. 15. Jay, who was going to die, suddenly sat up from the ground after muttering, "Don't forget him." Damn, he moved his neck. Is this male protagonist sick? Then he stood up and helped me, who was crying bitterly. "If you want to die, just kill yourself. Why should you let others bear the guilt after you die? Who the hell is this director? If you can't do this, get out of here. The play is not over yet. This is the final version that the director and I have discussed long ago. Play within a play." Colleagues onlookers whispered excitedly, taking the lead in instilling new ideas into the sad audience. "Yeah, why do you want to borrow someone else's hand to die? Isn't it disgusting? Isn't this just moral kidnapping disguised as affection? Why don't you forget him and take him home? What's the matter? Are you preparing for a reunion in the next life? It's really low level. These days, you don't even act like you torture a dog just for the sake of torture." Luke's face darkened visibly, and he forced himself to stay calm and look at me carefully. He wanted to read the clues in my expression. I raised my head with Jay's help. When he saw the wound on Jay's neck, he asked him to wipe it off in disgust. Jay said, "You are addicted to this crappy novel. You have to experience Jeremy's selfless love before I will cooperate with you in this drama. Why are you disgusting me now?" I wiped the paint on his wound with a tissue, curled my lips and said, "If you don't experience it yourself, how will you know that the one who survives is the most painful? According to the script, not only will you have to bear the guilt in your life, but you will also have to make up for the debt in the next life. It is said that in the next life, he will scold him and yell at him, and he will only be willing to retrieve the memory of his previous life after he tortured his body and mind. Then, with the blessing of life-saving grace, the heroine endured her nausea and got back together with him." After I finished speaking, I caught a glimpse of Luke clutching his chest with his hands, his chest still rising and falling despite restraint. I know that kind of pain. How many midnight dreams come back? It tortures me deeply. I put my arms around Jay's neck and said, "It was obviously his own choice. He didn't fight for their love, and he went to die without even trying anything. I strongly suspect that he is actually self-aware." Jay smiled fondly at me. "What kind of self-knowledge?" I guess he probably knew that he was no match for the heroine, so he used this despicable method to make the heroine feel guilty for the rest of his life, even if he won. Jay smiled non-committally. This sentence is pure nonsense. However, I couldn't help but want to give back all these years of uselessness immediately. Luke was already curled up in the chair in agony, his shoulders slumped, his outline full of despair. It was impossible not to be heartbroken, especially after the hypnosis session that had just taken place and relived my past life with Jeremy. But if you want to break free, you have to peel off a layer of skin. In the last scene of the play, Jay asked me, "After all this, do you still feel that my love for you is not as good as Jeremy's in the play?" I know that if he means anything, he is asking this question for himself. I took a deep look at the audience, and it was hard for me to express the inextricable ties and the fateful sense of desperate pursuit. However, I was unwilling to surrender. Unwilling to surrender to the one who controls my destiny but refuses to give me any mercy. So I grabbed the life-saving straw Jay extended to me. I sank into Jay's gaze without any distractions. It's full of love, and my true heart is hidden there. So I said firmly, "Bullshit destiny is just the self-deception of those who are moved by themselves. I'm just following a show. How can you still take it seriously? It's just a dream, I won't take it seriously." Jay hugged me lovingly. The closing music sounded, and there was a clip of the actors narrating. The so-called destined person never exists. If there is, brave girls, that is what your heart desires and you are willing to accept it. There is no room for compromise. The curtain fell and I saw Luke slowly falling onto the bench in the first row, then completely isolated from the big screen. 16. The first audition of this play, which focused on new thinking about women, was a great success. I'll be touring dozens of shows with Jay. After that, I never saw Luke again. I think the Jeremy I loved so much was at least tough. Sooner or later, like me, he will gradually find flaws in that lack of control. As a person who is also controlled by fate, I sincerely wish him to break free from the shackles as soon as possible. 17. After I was completely free from Jeremy, my symptoms gradually improved. I'm almost certainly finally free of the pen that controls me. On the last tour, Jay finally officially confessed his love to me. Not on stage, not in the rehearsal space. In a private place, he formally separated from his role in the play and solemnly asked me if I wanted to be with him. Once again, I saw determination in others' eyes, the tacit understanding in dozens of performances, the ambiguity in countless rehearsals, and the moments when true feelings were revealed, made it clear to him that we were attracted to each other. He looked at me firmly. "Madeline, thank you for breaking through the obstacles and coming to me." He held the ring up in front of me, full of anticipation. I didn't reach out. He raised his head and asked calmly, "Let me wear your engagement ring willingly. Is this your strategy mission?" Jay stood there in shock and the ring fell down. The maniac who plays so easily with countless characters shows a rare expression of panic. It took a while for him to recover, and then he laughed to himself. He said, "That's right. The heroine who can escape her fate. How could she not see my tricks?" I didn't say anything. In fact, I didn't know that he was a raider very early. At first, I only suspected that he was related to Jeremy. Seeing him constantly emphasizing on breaking away from fate, I thought he was the salvation in the dark. Until Luke wakes up. I saw the panic in his eyes, and the panic was not like the panic of losing a lover, so after knowing that this was a novel, I made such a bold guess. It's just speculation. The determination just now was just a hint of temptation. And he gave me the worst answer. It was extremely quiet inside. An intimate relationship that loses its whitewash looks fragile and hypocritical. All the sweet moments from the past came out and slapped Jay in the face. He lit a cigarette, and the smoke made him frown and squint. It seems like it will bring tears to my eyes. I was the first to break the silence. What will happen if the strategy is successful? He looked at me for a long time through the smoke. I will leave and return to my world. Jay should be a little scared. Who doesn't want to go home? He is only one step away from success. He must be afraid that I won't help him. I picked up the ring that fell on the ground and looked at it carefully. The initials of our names were engraved on the skin, and he put them carefully. He even got it in my size and it fit just right. I put it on my finger and Jay burst into tears. He pretended to be choked by the cigarette and coughed violently to cover it up. No need to feel guilty. I smiled and wiped away the tears on my cheeks. We just each take what we have. Jay looked at me confused. Since he was the attacker, I think he should have known. At that time, the psychiatrist gave me 2 plans. One is through Luke withdrawal. The other is transfer in love. Jay is just another medication for me. From the moment I saw the script and met him, I had doubts about him. Since it was given to me, there was no reason not to use it. Jay came out at once, was silent for a while, and smiled awkwardly. He twice. Then took a puff of cigarette and laughed. I laughed too. He picked up the red wine glass next to him. I bumped into him. It's a pleasure to work with you, my Miss Madeline. Very pleasant, my Mr. Jeremy. We were so happy that we burst into tears. 18. The last performance ended perfectly. Jay held me on stage for a long time and refused to let go. Goodbye for real this time, my Mr. Jeremy. Leave with peace of mind. Nothing will happen to me. I don't love either you or Luke. I will not love the arrangement of fate, nor will I love the players playing chess like chess pieces. Even if it means redemption, I will not be willing to do so. To break away from fate like peeling off layers of skin, just want my love, just love because of love, nothing else. Jay finally let go of his hand, turned around and bowed. And I, after experiencing 2 unforgettable moments of passiveness, finally have the right to love freely.